Sarah sat at the edge of a polished mahogany table, eyes quietly scanning the familiar theater of expressions and gestures playing out before her. This wasn't her first time witnessing this scene. It repeated like a well-worn play with predictable lines. The conversation floated gently through the air, carefully orchestrated ballet of social niceties. Weather, upcoming vacations, the latest Netflix obsession. Everyone was binge-watching something. Laughter bubbled up at just the right moments, as if on cue. Heads nodded in near-perfect sync, and the predictable rhythm of small talk swept through the space like ambient music in a hotel lobby. And yet, Sarah heard something different. Something deeper. Beneath the surface of cheerful chatter and practiced grins, there was another melody, playing a quieter, more fragile tune that only she seemed to notice. She caught the faint tremor in Michael's voice when he mentioned his recent promotion. A momentary flicker of pride? Maybe. But Sarah heard the fear tucked beneath it, the fear of not living up to the title he now wore. She saw the way Jennifer's eyes shifted away when someone casually asked about her marriage. The corner of her smile didn't lift quite as high. It was subtle, but to Sarah, it was telling. The tightening of her jaw, the fraction of a second pause. These were the truths others missed. Then there was David, quiet, almost invisible, retreating further into himself each time the conversation drifted toward ambition or success. His silence wasn't the absence of something, it was the presence of something unspoken. The rest of the group, lost in the comforting rhythm of pleasantries, seemed blissfully unaware of these silent signals. They skimmed the surface of interaction, like stones skipping across a lake, never diving in, never breaking the surface tension. But Sarah always dove deep. With every lingering glance, every barely audible sigh, every word chosen or not chosen, she read the space between the sentences. It wasn't a skill she learned. It was something innate, as if she were born with invisible antennae, tuned to frequencies others ignored. When the conversation eventually turned to current events, a subtle shift sparked inside her. This was her opening. A moment of possible substance in a sea of superficiality. She leaned in, her voice laced with genuine curiosity, her tone just a bit more deliberate. "Isn't it strange?" she asked softly. "How we're all more connected than ever through technology. And yet, loneliness keeps rising. I read something about how social media creates this paradox: connection and isolation at the same time. It makes me wonder, are we truly connecting or just performing connection?" Her words lingered in the air, heavy with intention. What followed wasn't engagement. It was discomfort, silence, averted gazes. The invisible wall that often met her honesty rose up again, unyielding. She offered a polite smile, one she had practiced too well, and gently withdrew. Inside, her thoughts weighed heavy stones she carried in secret pockets. Heavy but precious. This isn't a fairy tale about a misunderstood genius. It's something far more raw, far more real. It's the story of the deep thinker, the one who sees clearly in a world that clings to comfortable illusions, the one who feels deeply in a society that fears depth. It's about those who ask the hard questions, who sense what's unspoken, who challenge what's accepted. Even when the world turns away, it's not easy to be the one who doesn't look away. Love, but none hurt like you. You rain on my soul, your shadow won't part. Tell me your love won't warm, staring wails like my tears in the dark. Steel drum sides where you left your mark. Chicago streets crown my world for art. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist who spent his life exploring the hidden depths of the human psyche, knew this internal landscape all too well. He once wrote, "The more intelligent and self-aware a person is, the more they suffer from the general unconsciousness of society." His words weren't meant to glorify suffering. They were a solemn acknowledgement, a recognition of the beautiful, yet heavy burden carried by those who simply cannot unsee what they have already seen. And what happens when you can't unsee the truth? When even joy becomes laced with awareness. I keep sooner. Your heart breaks my endless we. a line that echoes the quiet ache of being attuned to everything, yet understood by so few. It's a form of alienation, not just of place, but of perception. Sort of internal architecture of alienation. What truly defines a deep thinker? Is it a sharp mind? A heightened emotional sensitivity? Or is it something else, some fateful wiring of the soul that dooms certain people to walk the margins of society, watching from the edges? The truth is far more layered, more intricate than any single cause. Friedrich Nietzsche is the radical German philosopher who famously declared, "God is dead." Also wrote extensively about the free spirit, the one who escapes the cages of tradition and illusion, only to find themselves wandering a vast, lonely wilderness. These free spirits, Nietzsche argued, were vital to the evolution of human consciousness. But liberation came at a cost, profound one. For in shedding the comfort of conformity, they also shed the illusion of belonging. For many, this journey begins not in adulthood, but in childhood. While other kids eagerly absorb the world as it's presented to them, a select few begin to ask questions, those piercing, inconvenient questions that make adults shift uncomfortably in their chairs. Why do grown-ups say one thing and do another? Why do we have to smile when we're sad? Why does love sometimes feel like a transaction? Why do the rules seem to change depending on who's in the room? These children learn quickly. It's not the answers, but the consequences of asking. They're told to stop thinking so much, to just play, just follow, just smile. Be more like everyone else. And so, the questions go silent, but they never truly vanish. They deepen, hide, evolve. Over time, they become inner monologues, silent debates, late-night spirals. The thinker grows up, but the questions remain. Arthur Schopenhauer, the bleak yet brilliant philosopher who influenced both Nietzsche and Jung, once compared humans to hedgehogs in winter. Each one seeking warmth, desperate for connection, but if they get too close, they wound one another with their spines. For the deep thinker, this metaphor cuts particularly deep. They long for closeness, for intimacy, for someone who gets it. But their very depth, those same traits that make them wise, can also make them sharp, difficult, even painful. But perhaps the most fascinating discovery comes not from philosophy, but from neuroscience. Dr. Elaine Aron, a leading researcher on high sensitivity, has found that approximately 20% of people are born with a more finely tuned nervous system. These individuals, often dubbed highly sensitive people, don't just think deeply, they feel deeply. They process information with unusual depth and notice details others miss entirely. A change in tone, a glance, a pause. To others, meaningless. To them, revealing this isn't imagination, it's biology. Being neurologically different means perceiving life in higher resolution, all its textures, contradictions, and hidden meanings. It's not a choice, it's a lens, and through that lens, life is both unbearably beautiful and often unbearably lonely. Steel drum sides where you left your mark. Chicago streets crown my world for art. Steel drum sides where you left your mark. Chicago streets crown my world for art. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist who spent his life exploring the hidden depths of the human psyche, knew this internal landscape all too well. He once wrote, "The more intelligent and self-aware a person is, the more they suffer from the general unconsciousness of society." His words weren't meant to glorify suffering. They were a solemn acknowledgement, a recognition of the beautiful, yet heavy burden carried by those who simply cannot unsee what they have already seen. And what happens when you can't unsee the truth? When even joy becomes laced with awareness. I keep sooner. Your heart breaks my endless we, a line that echoes the quiet ache of being attuned to everything, yet understood by so few. It's a form of alienation, not just of place, but of perception. Sort of internal architecture of alienation. What truly defines a deep thinker? Is it a sharp mind? A heightened emotional sensitivity? Or is it something else, some fateful wiring of the soul that dooms certain people to walk the margins of society, watching from the edges? The truth is far more layered, more intricate than any single cause. Friedrich Nietzsche is the radical German philosopher who famously declared, "God is dead." Also wrote extensively about the free spirit, the one who escapes the cages of tradition and illusion, only to find themselves wandering a vast, lonely wilderness. These free spirits, Nietzsche argued, were vital to the evolution of human consciousness. But liberation came at a cost, profound one. For in shedding the comfort of conformity, they also shed the illusion of belonging. For many, this journey begins not in adulthood, but in childhood. While other kids eagerly absorb the world as it's presented to them, a select few begin to ask questions, those piercing, inconvenient questions that make adults shift uncomfortably in their chairs. Why do grown-ups say one thing and do another? Why do we have to smile when we're sad? Why does love sometimes feel like a transaction? Why do the rules seem to change depending on who's in the room? These children learn quickly, not the answers, but the consequences of asking. They're told to stop thinking so much, to just play, just follow, just smile. Be more like everyone else. And so, the questions go silent, but they never truly vanish. They deepen, hide, evolve. Over time, they become inner monologues, silent debates, late-night spirals. The thinker grows up, but the questions remain. Arthur Schopenhauer, the bleak, yet brilliant philosopher who influenced both Nietzsche and Jung, once compared humans to hedgehogs in winter. Each one seeking warmth, desperate for connection, but if they get too close, they wound one another with their spines. For the deep thinker, this metaphor cuts particularly deep. They long for closeness, for intimacy, for someone who gets it. But their very depth, those same traits that make them wise, can also make them sharp, difficult, even painful. But perhaps the most fascinating discovery comes not from philosophy, but from neuroscience. Dr. Elaine Aron, a leading researcher on high sensitivity, has found that approximately 20% of people are born with a more finely tuned nervous system. These individuals, often dubbed highly sensitive people, don't just think deeply, they feel deeply. They process information with unusual depth and notice details others miss entirely. A change in tone, a glance, a pause. To others, meaningless. To them, revealing this isn't imagination, it's biology. Being neurologically different means perceiving life in higher resolution. With all its textures, contradictions, and hidden meanings, it's not a choice, it's a lens. And through that lens, life is both unbearably beautiful, and often unbearably lonely. Steel drum sides where you left your mark. Chicago streets crown my world for art. These individuals, whom she calls highly sensitive persons, or HSPs, often overlap significantly with what we commonly describe as deep thinkers. They are not merely introspective or overly emotional, their brains actually function differently. The deep thinker doesn't just hear what's said, they hear what isn't. They absorb nuances others miss, notice subtle shifts in tone or body, language, and pick up on emotional undercurrents most people never register. They process information thoroughly, relentlessly often, turning over the same thought for hours, even days. But in a world that thrives on speed, efficiency, and surface-level interaction, this depth can feel like a burden. In environments where instant reactions are prized over considered responses, where superficial charisma often outweighs quiet insight, the deep thinker may find themselves misunderstood or even dismissed. This depth of processing, instead of being recognized as a strength, can often feel like a disability rather than a gift. Consider the modern workplace. Here, the deep thinker's desire for meaning and integrity regularly clashes with the cold demands of corporate culture, speed over care, results over reflection. While others manage to separate their personal values from their professional roles, it's just a job, they say. Deep thinker struggles. How can one feel motivated to complete a task that feels ethically murky or utterly void of significance? They're the ones who raise difficult questions during team meetings, the ones who spot contradictions in company values, the ones who don't laugh at the manager's forced joke because they're too busy wondering why everyone's pretending. They often abstain from office gossip, resist manipulative jargon, and refuse to compromise their personal truths for the sake of fitting in. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, once wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that humans can endure almost any suffering if they can find meaning in it. But what becomes of the human spirit when meaning is systematically removed from everyday life? What happens when work devolves into output metrics, when relationships turn transactional, when life becomes an endless loop of digital distraction? What happens when nobody pauses long enough to ask why? The deep thinker doesn't just notice this void, they feel it with crushing intensity. They cannot fake engagement, pretend fulfillment, or go through the motions without consequence. They need their work to reflect purpose. They crave relationships that are authentic, honest, raw. They need conversations that stir their soul, not just fill time. They need their lives to matter. And in a society that often rewards performance over authenticity, speed over stillness, appearance over truths, is it any wonder they feel alienated? It's not about ego. It's about frequency. The frequency of truth. Have you ever felt like someone is operating on an entirely different wavelength? They speak your language, but their words ring hollow. They laugh at things that don't seem funny. They light up about topics that feel empty, and yet remain indifferent to moments that move you to tears. You're both present, but not connected. It's as if you're tuned into a deeper signal, one they can't quite hear. This difference isn't rooted in education, IQ, or sophistication. It's about frequency. Carl Jung spoke often of the collective unconscious, that vast invisible realm, where humanity's most ancient fears, desires, and myths live on. According to Jung, many people go through their lives without ever confronting their unconscious selves. They follow inherited scripts, cultural, familial, societal, without question. They live safely on the surface, but the deep thinker, plunged below, they've brushed up against that deeper current, that space where truth lives raw and unfiltered. They've questioned not just what is, but why it is. They've seen through the layers. And once you've seen beneath the surface, how do you go back? They've touched something real beneath the surface of everyday consciousness. And once you've felt that authenticity, everything else feels like performance. It's like waking up from a long, colorless dream and stepping into a world suddenly saturated with light and meaning. It's not just that reality becomes more vivid, it's that falsehood becomes unbearable. It's the laughter that isn't real, the gestures that are rehearsed, the conversations that dance around the truth but never touch it. You can't unknow what you've come to know. It's like discovering color after living in a black and white world. Once you've seen the vibrancy of truth, how can you pretend that grayscale is enough? This dissonance creates a kind of existential rift, what we might call the frequency problem. Deep thinkers resonate at the frequency of truth, a frequency that cuts through illusion, penetrates silence, and refuses to look away. But the world, by and large, prefers comfort. It hums along at the frequency of comfort, where ease, acceptance, social harmony take precedence over difficult realities. The thing about truth is that it rarely shows up dressed in politeness. Truth is often uncomfortable, inconvenient, and disruptive. It compels us to examine what we've ignored, to confront what we've buried, to question what we've always accepted as normal. Who really welcomes that kind of disruption into their carefully curated life? This struggle is not new. In fact, ancient traditions have long acknowledged it. The Buddhist concept of Maya, the veil of illusion that clouds human perception, captures this beautifully. Most people live comfortably within Maya, mistaking illusion for reality, blissfully unaware that they're dancing in shadows. But every once in a while, someone glimpses behind the curtain. And once that happens, it becomes impossible to unsee. The deep thinker has glimpsed behind the veil, and they cannot rejoin the collective dream without feeling the weight of its unreality. This does not make them better, it makes them burdened. It makes them lonely. Imagine being the only person in a crowded room who sees that the emperor has no clothes. You point it out, not to ridicule, not to draw attention, but simply because it's the truth. Yet your truth is met not with curiosity or gratitude, but with suspicion. You're labeled disruptive, pessimistic, or overly intense. Make people look away, uncomfortable, not with what you said, but with the fact that it needed saying. You're not trying to be difficult. You're simply unable to participate in the collective denial. This phenomenon was captured with chilling clarity by Plato in his allegory of the cave. Prisoners chained since birth see only shadows on the wall and take them for reality. One breaks free, stumbles into the light, and sees the real world. For the first time, when he returns to share what he's seen, the others reject him. They ridicule him. They fear the light he's encountered. They'd rather cling to the comfort of illusion than endure the pain of awakening. The truth-teller becomes the outsider, the agitator, the one who disturbs the peace not because he is unkind, but because he is unwilling to lie. But Plato also understood something many overlook. The freed prisoner bears responsibility, even in the face of rejection. Even when the truth is dismissed. He must speak not for himself alone, but because truth has intrinsic value. Because someone must be willing to see clearly and speak honestly. The deep thinker carries this burden of witness. They move through the world as observers of unseen truths, perceiving the masks people wear, recognizing the societal systems that exploit, sensing the emotional wounds that others have numbed. They don't just see pain. They feel the collective pain that others have learned to ignore. They hold the unanswered questions that still ache quietly beneath the surface of modern life. They carry the questions that others have stopped asking. It can be isolating, even devastating, but it is also essential. Because without those who are willing to see, to feel, to speak, how would we ever know we were asleep? Oh, river, hear my heart. It's breaking in the midnight rain. Please, oh river, hear my heart's breaking in the midnight rain. She's gone, and her shadow's carved in me, flowing with this endless shaken pain. Don't let the current drown my tears. Don't let the darkness swallow my fears. Please, sweet river, carry my sorrow downstream, my soul torn apart. Crying to the river for a dream, the emotional sponge. Picture this. You walk into a room and instantly, without a word being spoken, you know something's off. There's a buzz of casual conversation. People are smiling, laughing, tossing around weekend plans like confetti. But beneath it all, there's a tension you can't ignore. It hums under the surface like a low, dissonant note, while others remain blissfully unaware, talking as if everything is perfectly fine. You feel like you're drowning in unspoken emotions. Welcome to the world of the deep thinker, where emotional boundaries are so porous, they often resemble Swiss cheese. This heightened sensitivity to the emotional atmosphere isn't a mood or a phase. It's a constant state of being. Carl Jung identified this experience as a form of psychological contagion, the unconscious transmission of emotions and psychological states between individuals. While this affects all people to some extent, for deep thinkers, it's amplified. Their emotional antenna is always raised, always scanning, always receiving signals from every direction, whether they want to or not. Psychiatrist Dr. Judith Orloff, a pioneer in the study of empaths and sensitive individuals, calls this experience being an emotional sponge, and it's exactly that. Deep thinkers don't merely observe others' feelings from a distance. They absorb them. They internalize the stress of a colleague under pressure, carry the sorrow of a friend in the midst of heartbreak. They soak in the silent rage of a stranger in a crowded subway. And often, the most bewildering part is that they may not realize these emotions aren't even their own. This absorption doesn't come from choice. It's not a decision made out of empathy or care. It's more like owning a radio with no off switch, permanently tuned into frequencies most people don't even know exist. Always broadcasting, always receiving. It's always feeling. And the outcome. It's a kind of exhaustion that goes beyond the physical, a deep soul-level tiredness that even the longest sleep cannot fix. But the complexity doesn't stop there. In fact, it goes deeper. Because the world has learned how to lean on this sensitivity. People are drawn to deep thinkers the way moths are drawn to flame. Even without consciously realizing it, they sense, here is someone who will truly listen. Here is someone who will not just hear me, but feel me. And so, the deep thinker becomes the silent therapist, the emotional container, the safe harbor for other people's storms. They're the friend everyone calls in crisis. The coworker who always just knows when something is wrong. The one who remembers birthdays, anniversaries, silent battles. The irony, of course, is cutting. Those who most need emotional support themselves, who are already bearing the weight of their own intense inner lives. Plus the emotions they've absorbed from others, the ones others turn to for comfort. It's like asking someone who's already drowning to save others from drowning. Psychologist Dr. Karen Hall writes eloquently about emotional labor. The invisible, often unacknowledged work of managing not just our own emotional states, but those of the people around us. And in the life of a deep thinker, emotional labor is constant, relentless. They check in on friends others have forgotten. They notice subtle cues, a trembling voice, a forced smile, and respond with compassion. They show up again and again. But when they finally collapse under the weight of it, all when they need someone to lean on, they will often find that no one knows how to support them in return. Their strength is mistaken for self-sufficiency. Their depth is seen as resilience. But underneath, they are breaking, quietly, invisibly, waiting for someone to recognize their silent plea. They're the ones who remember anniversaries, who check in on friends going through difficult times, who notice when someone is struggling and offers support. But when they need support themselves, they often find that others don't know how to provide it. The deep thinker's emotional needs are complex, nuanced, and often difficult to understand. They go beyond surface-level comfort or generic reassurances. These are not the kinds of needs that can be satisfied with a casual, "you'll be fine," or a quick pep talk. They require presence. They require listening. They require someone who is willing to sit in the depth with them without trying to fix, minimize, or escape it. They need to be truly seen, not just acknowledged. Deeply understood, not simply heard. And most importantly, met at their level of depth. This often leads to what we might call an emotional asymmetry in relationships. The deep thinker tends to give generously, consistently, and profoundly. But when it comes time to receive that same emotional depth, they often find the space empty or awkwardly quiet. They become exceptionally skilled at holding space for others, at sensing needs unspoken, at offering comfort, insight, and stability. But when it's their turn to speak, to voice their own confusion, or pain, or longing, it can feel like they're speaking an unfamiliar language, a language others don't recognize. The result is a very particular kind of loneliness, not the kind that comes from physical isolation or lack of company. The loneliness of being misunderstood. The quiet ache of knowing that your thoughts and emotions run deeper than most are willing or able to go. It's the pain of having to translate your inner world into simpler terms, just so it won't overwhelm the people around you. It's the heartbreak of always being the strong one, the wise one, the one who seems to have it all figured out when inside, you're often just as lost, just as unsure, just as human as anyone else. And so enters what we might call the mask of normalcy. There's a moment, sometimes subtle, sometimes jarring, in every deep thinker's life when they realize they're different, not better, not special, just different. And it doesn't come all at once. It arrives in fragments, sideways glances, awkward silences, dismissive comments, subtle rejections. These moments add up. They begin to form a message, the way you see the world. Isn't quite welcome here. And that's when the mask begins to form. It's not deceit, it's survival. The deep thinker learns, often painfully, to filter themselves. They become adept at choosing the right words, modulating their tone, scanning the emotional climate of every room before daring to speak. They become master readers of people, not to manipulate, but simply to navigate safely. The mask serves many purposes. It reduces friction, shields them from judgment, allows them to pass through everyday social situations with fewer disruptions. But more than anything, it protects others from having to feel things they aren't ready to feel, from facing depths they don't want to acknowledge. The mask becomes a kind of emotional diplomacy, a quiet signal that says, "Don't worry, I'll keep it light, won't go too deep." But here's the cost. Masks are exhausting. They require energy, constant mental calculations, constant self-correction, continual performance. They demand that the deep thinker deny their own authenticity. Minute by minute, hour by hour, they learn to laugh at jokes they don't find funny, to nod enthusiastically at ideas that don't interest them, to ignore their visceral reactions, to cruelty, manipulation, or superficiality, because showing that truth would be too disruptive, too much. The existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre wrote about bad faith, the lies we tell ourselves to avoid the responsibility of being truly authentic. But for the deep thinker, this isn't about escaping authenticity. It's about making that authenticity less threatening, more digestible. They know exactly who they are. They just can't always afford to show it. And this leads to a quiet fracture within the self. One part of them remains private, curious, passionate, reflective, and intensely alive, while the other part, the one shown to the world, becomes simpler, safer, more agreeable. This inner split creates a kind of psychological tension that is difficult to describe. It requires immense energy to sustain. And over time, this strain accumulates into something psychologists refer to as masking fatigue, deep weariness that comes not from doing too much, but from being too little of who you really are. The deep thinker learns to laugh at jokes they don't find funny, to express enthusiasm for things that bore them, to hide their reactions to the cruelty and superficiality they witness daily. The existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre wrote about bad faith. The deep thinker often feels like they're living a double life. Authentic in private, but performative in public. It's not an act born from deceit, but rather from necessity. They wear one face for the world, measured, filtered, careful, and keep their true face hidden away, only revealing it to a rare few, or sometimes not at all. But here lies the heartbreak. This careful masking often backfires. Instead of protecting them, it inadvertently isolates them even more. Yes, the mask may help them avoid judgment or discomfort in social settings, but at what cost? It prevents the formation of the deep, soulful connections they so deeply crave. How can someone be truly known, truly understood, if they are constantly concealing the very parts of themselves that matter most? How can they find the people who might truly resonate with their thoughts and emotions if they're busy camouflaging their true essence just to fit in? And yet the alternative to drop the mask entirely can feel like stepping off a cliff without a parachute. It's not that the deep thinker doesn't want to be seen. It's that they've been seen before, and it hurt. Painful experience has taught them that their unfiltered self is often too much for the world, too intense, too reflective, too questioning. They've seen how their curiosity can intimidate, how their emotional honesty can make others squirm, how their very depth can be perceived as a threat or an inconvenience. This is the deep thinker's catch-22. On one hand, they need authentic connection. It's the lifeblood of their emotional and intellectual well-being. On the other hand, the very authenticity that nourishes them is what often drives people away. They yearn to be understood, but when they show their true self, they're met with discomfort, defensiveness, or polite withdrawal. They need community, a real one, built on mutual depth and resonance. But such a space can feel like a distant island in an ocean of surface-level interactions. And so they live in a paradox, wanting to be known but fearing the cost of being real. The internal tension this creates is no small thing. It eats away at the soul, leaving the deep thinker in a state of constant negotiation between their inner truth and the external demands of social survival. This brings us to a broader issue, one that transcends the personal and enters the realm of culture, the collective unconscious conspiracy. Psychologist Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious suggests that beneath our individual minds lies a shared psychic blueprint, a deep well of symbols, instincts, and archetypes that shape our human experience. It's a powerful concept, one that speaks to our deep-rooted commonalities as a species. But what happens when this shared mental space becomes polluted? What happens when our collective psyche develops a fear of depth, authenticity, and raw emotional truth? We now live in what many psychologists and sociologists call a post-truth society, not because truth no longer exists, but because we've collectively chosen to prioritize comfort over clarity, appearance over authenticity, and agreement over integrity. We've built cultural and institutional systems that reward the easy lie over the hard truth, that elevate polished performance while punishing honest expression. Within this structure, the deep thinker finds themselves at odds with the very framework they inhabit. They feel like the child in the old fairy tale, the one who blurts out that the emperor has no clothes. But rather than being hailed for their courage or clarity, they're often silenced, dismissed, or labeled as a problem. Take, for example, the modern workplace. Emotional intelligence may be praised in theory, printed in HR brochures, or spoken about in leadership seminars. But in practice, the deep thinker who dares to name dysfunction, who challenges unethical norms, or who refuses to play political games is quickly seen as difficult, too intense, or not a team player. Ironically, the very qualities that should make them invaluable, their insight, integrity, and unwillingness to conform blindly, are often treated as liabilities. In environments that prioritize groupthink and smooth functioning over truth and depth, the deep thinker becomes a misfit. And it's not just the corporate world. The educational system offers another glaring example. From an early age, students are conditioned to value the right answer over the right question. Trained to memorize, to follow instructions, to comply, while curiosity, critical thinking, and emotional insight are often sidelined. The children who dare to wonder out loud, who challenge assumptions, who feel deeply and ask boldly, these are the ones told to tone it down. The deep thinker who points out toxic dynamics, who questions unethical practices, or who refuses to participate in office politics is often labeled as not a team player or difficult to work with. The very qualities that make them valuable, their integrity, their insight, their unwillingness to. The deep thinker child who naturally questions assumptions and seeks understanding rather than just information often struggles in these environments. These environment, schools, peer groups, even family systems tend to reward conformity, not curiosity. The child who inquires deeply, who lingers in thought while others race ahead, may be seen as a distraction or even a problem. What happens when your natural way of seeing the world is met, not with encouragement, but with irritation or dismissal, rather than being praised for their insight? These children are often told to just follow instructions, to stop asking so many questions, or to stop thinking so hard. Over time, these small moments chip away at their confidence. They begin to wonder if something is wrong with the way they think, simply because it doesn't align with the system around them. Social media amplifies this phenomenon by creating digital landscapes where subtlety, complexity, thoughtfulness are often drowned out by speed, simplicity, and sensationalism. In these algorithm-driven spaces, nuance is sacrificed for virality, and depth is flattened into digestible sound bites. The very platforms that promise connection often end up promoting conformity, where what trends is not what is true or thoughtful, but what is loudest, flashiest, or most provocative. The deep thinker, with their natural draw toward contemplation and layered insight, often feels alien in such environments. Their thoughtful reflections rarely fit into the short-form, dopamine-driven structures of digital culture. Quick likes and superficial commentary do little to satisfy the deep thinker's need for meaningful exchange. It's like trying to express symphonies using only a single note, but perhaps most insidiously. The broader culture shaped by this fast-paced digital age has begun to exhibit what might best be described as depth phobia, a widespread fear of psychological and emotional complexity. It's not just that people avoid depth, we've built entire systems designed to distract from it. We've created a world that medicates discomfort, pathologizes sadness, and celebrates relentless positivity. Unpleasant emotions are labeled as disorders before they're even fully understood. Introspection is dismissed as overthinking, and expressing genuine sorrow is quickly met with advice to cheer up or stay positive. In such a climate, We've been conditioned to fear our own inner lives as if looking inward were somehow dangerous or unproductive. The deep thinker, who naturally gravitates toward introspection and emotional truth, often finds themselves swimming upstream against this cultural current. They are told they're too much when they express strong emotions, or too negative when they refuse to engage in toxic positivity. Yet what they are actually doing is responding appropriately to reality with honesty, sensitivity, and awareness. This dynamic creates a form of gaslighting that is especially damaging. The deep thinker is not just rejected, they are made to doubt the validity of their own emotional and intellectual experiences. Are they truly too sensitive? Too complicated? Or is the world simply too uncomfortable with depth? They begin to internalize these messages, and with time, the rejection they feel from society becomes a voice inside their own head. They may start to self-edit even before speaking, second-guessing their instincts, questioning whether their insights have any place in a world that seems to prize simplicity over sincerity. The paradox of visibility. Here's a curious and painful paradox that many deep thinkers live with every day. They feel both invisible and exposed at the same time. Invisible because their inner world of vivid landscape of thoughts, feelings, insights, and questions goes largely unnoticed or unacknowledged by those around them. Few people truly see the richness of their internal life, and yet they also feel constantly exposed. Their sensitivity makes them hyper-aware of social cues, rejection, and subtle emotional shifts. A sideways glance, a misunderstood word, or a dismissive tone can pierce them more deeply than others might realize. They are vulnerable, not because they are weak, but because they are profoundly attuned. This paradox generates a unique kind of psychological tension. The deep thinker longs to be seen, to be known, to have their inner landscape validated. They also carry the memory of what happens when they are too visible. They've been dismissed, misunderstood, or even ridiculed for showing their depth. As a result, they learn to hide in plain sight. They develop sophisticated strategies, not of deception, but of self-preservation. They know how to present just enough of themselves to function socially, while carefully tucking away the parts that feel too raw, too real. It's overwhelming for the average interaction. The ancient Greek concept of kenosis, kind of self-emptying, captures this perfectly. In order to be accepted, the deep thinker often empties themselves of their needs, their insights, and their emotional fullness. They dilute their truth to fit the mold. They shrink their presence so others can feel more comfortable. They become skilled at making themselves smaller, dimmer, less threatening. They withhold their insights so as not to seem arrogant. They suppress their emotional responses to avoid being called dramatic. Over time, this becomes second nature. But make no mistake, it comes at a cost. The deep thinker begins to lose touch with their own voice, their own needs, their own truth. Slowly, often without even realizing it. They shift from being the author of their story to merely reacting to the scripts of others. Their internal compass becomes clouded, not because they lack direction, but because they've grown so accustomed to navigating the emotional maps of everyone else. They become so skilled at reading and responding to others that they gradually stop listening to themselves. This heightened attunement to external emotional climates makes them masters of emotional camouflage. Like seasoned actors, they adapt seamlessly to whatever social environment they find themselves in. What's expected? Adjust their tone, modulate their energy, and mirror the emotions around them. They do this not for applause, but out of an almost instinctive survival strategy. The irony is piercing this very adaptability. A gift sharpened by years of navigating a world that often misunderstands or overwhelms them only makes them more invisible. They become chameleons, so expertly attuned to others' needs and expectations that their true self begins to fade quietly into the background. What began as a means of protection becomes a prison of invisibility. And one day, they find themselves asking, who am I when I'm not adjusting for everyone else? This leads us into what can only be called the authenticity trap. The deep thinker knows, deep in their bones, that authenticity is not optionally, is the key to meaningful connection. And yet, their past experiences have taught them that authenticity is risky, even dangerous. Their genuine thoughts have been dismissed as too much. Their true emotions have triggered discomfort in others. Their unfiltered presence has led to rejection, and so they find themselves caught in a painful dilemma between the isolation of hiding their truth and the fear of exposing it. It's like standing on a threshold, knowing that stepping forward might mean being hurt, while staying back guarantees loneliness. What's the answer? If there is one, it isn't to become less authentic, but to become more selective. The thinker must learn discernment, to recognize which environments and people are capable of meeting their depth without flinching. They must learn to stop pouring their soul into bottomless vessels. They must learn that their insight, their presence, their truths are not for everyone, and that's okay. They must learn to save their pearls for those who can appreciate their value. This brings us to a powerful archetype, described by Carl Jung, the wounded healer. This is the individual who, having been broken by life's trials, turns their wounds into medicine for others. Many deep thinkers, often without realizing it, embody this archetype. They carry inside themselves both deep scars and extraordinary compassion, a rare blend of pain and wisdom. Their wounds often originate not from one traumatic moment, but from a lifetime of feeling out of sync with the world around them. They've been told to quiet down, to be less intense, to stop seeing so much. They've heard in 100 subtle ways that their depth is inconvenient, that their curiosity is disruptive, that their empathy is excessive. They've risked vulnerability and been met with discomfort. They've reached out with sincerity and been turned away. They've been asked to mute their authenticity so that others can remain comfortable in their shallowness. But in time, these wounds become their greatest source of empathy. The deep thinker, who has experienced the pain of being unheard, becomes a master at listening. The one who has lived with the sting of being misunderstood learns how to truly see others. The one who was once too much develops the capacity to hold space for the vast emotional range of others without judgment. This transformation from wounded to healer is neither immediate nor effortless. It demands deep inner work. Jung called this journey individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating all parts of the self, even the parts that are messy, painful, or hidden in shadow. It means no longer rejecting one's own sensitivity, but embracing it as a strength. It means seeing intensity not as a flaw, but as a gift with purpose. It means holding one's depth not as a burden, but as a treasure that not everyone is meant to carry. But individuation also calls for another essential skill: boundaries. The deep thinker must learn that their empathy, while powerful, is not infinite. They must refuse to let themselves be drained by the constant emotional demands of others. They must recognize that offering support is noble, but self-preservation is necessary. They must also learn to set boundaries to protect their own well-being, to refuse to be drained by others' needs. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of the wounded healer's journey. To give from a place of love and empathy without draining their own reserves dry, to extend care and presence without dissolving their own identity in the process. It's learning to give without depleting themselves, to love without losing themselves. This is the tightrope the deep thinker must walk. The deep thinker, in their role as a wounded healer, offers something rare and deeply needed in today's world. They provide depth in a shallow culture, authenticity in a performative society, and soluble connection in an age that often favors curated appearances over honest engagement. In a landscape dominated by noise, they speak in quiet truths. In a world consumed with image, they offer essence. They serve as bridges between the conscious and unconscious, the expressed and the unspoken, the surface and the soul. They are translators of emotion, interpreters of silence, connectors of hearts that often don't know how to reach each other. But to sustain this role, the deep thinker must ground themselves in a resource many people overlook: solitude, the alchemy of solitude. In a society increasingly driven by appearance, speed, and conformity, the presence of a person anchored in authenticity becomes quietly radical. These individuals, grounded in inner alignment, are not easily swayed by trends, groupthink, or superficial validation. This is why authentic deep thinkers often find themselves marginalized or labeled as difficult. Their refusal to follow the crowd, to nod politely at falsehoods, or participate in empty rituals makes them unsettling to those who prefer comfort over truth. They will not play the game that keeps everyone busy, distracted and docile. Instead, they ask the questions that expose the emperor's nakedness, daring to speak what many only whisper in private. They feel the emotions that others have been conditioned to suppress: grief, more longing, and they do not flinch in the face of that depth. Make no mistake, this resistance to conformity is not rooted in rebellion for rebellion's sake. This refusal to conform isn't about being contrary or rebellious for its own sake. It stems from a deep sense of integrity and inner necessity to live in alignment with their truth. For the deep thinker, authenticity is not optional. It is the only way to exist without spiritual suffocation. They cannot live a lie, cannot pretend to value what feels empty, or pretend joy when sorrow weighs heavily on their heart. Their inner compass demands coherence between their values and their voice, between their insight and their actions. This integrity is both their burden and their gift. It's a burden because it isolates them, as they often feel like outsiders in conversations obsessed with triviality or consumption. They are the ones asking what really matters, in a world asking what's trending. Yet it is also their gift, perhaps their greatest one. Their authenticity enables them to act as witnesses to truth, as guardians of inner depth, as bridges between what is visible and what lies just beneath. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote of the leap of faith, the bold act of believing in the unseen. For the deep thinker, there's a similar leap required, the leap of authenticity. It is the decision to be fully themselves, even when it risks misunderstanding, discomfort, or rejection. It's the quiet but powerful choice to speak with honesty. Even if their voice shakes, it's the act of showing up with their full emotional landscape. Even when others prefer a curated highlight reel. This leap is no small feat. It means accepting that they may be misunderstood, rejected, or isolated. It means choosing truth, even when a lie would be easier. It means choosing authenticity over fitting in, meaning over mindless ease. Yet in making this choice, the deep thinker also opens the door to a different kind of life, a life of real connection, of purposeful work, and of alignment with the values that matter most. The ripple effect. What many may not see is how far-reaching the impact of such authenticity can be. Like a pebble dropped into a still pond. The influence of the deep thinker extends in quiet ripples, touching lives and minds in ways they may never witness directly. The deep thinker's influence extends far beyond their immediate circle. Each time they stand in truth, they subtly invite others to do the same. Each time they name what's real, they give others silent permission to wake up. They are often catalysts planting seeds in conversations, challenging assumptions without aggression, inspiring others to explore what lies beneath their own personas. Their commitment to depth creates space for others to explore their own inner worlds. They may never know that a single honest conversation shifted someone's worldview. They might never hear that their emotional courage allowed someone else to feel their own grief, their own longing, more fully. But the impact remains. They may never realize that their emotional honesty gave someone else permission to feel their own feelings. Like lanterns in a fog, their authenticity lights the path for others who are still trying to find their way. But the ripples are real. Every act of courage, of refusing to perform, of daring to go deep in a shallow world each, one contributes to a slow, steady awakening. A cultural shift toward depth, truth, and connection. A new norm where people value substance over image, meaning over distraction, consciousness over complacency. They help create a culture that values substance over style, meaning over distraction, consciousness over unconsciousness. This is the deep thinker's ultimate calling. Not to be understood by everyone because not everyone is ready to understand, but to stay unwaveringly true to their own depth, even when it isolates them. Not to fix a world that often resists change, but to courageously refuse participation. in its widespread denial. It's not to chase universal approval, but to love themselves so deeply that authenticity becomes non-negotiable. Not to be loved by all, but to love themselves enough to stay authentic. The world needs deep thinkers now more than ever. It did. In an era dominated by artificial intelligence and virtual facades, there's a growing hunger for something real, something felt, something true. We live in a time where polarization increases while nuance disappears, where headlines replace understanding, speed replaces depth. A culture that values speed over depth. We need those who are willing to slow down and think carefully, who will sit with complexity instead of simplifying it, who will ask not just what's happening, but why does it matter? And so the invitation arrives, subtle but persistent. If you recognize yourself in these words, if your heart stirs with the familiar ache of being too much in a world that prefers things smaller, neater, quieter, then this is your invitation. A call to stop apologizing for your depth. 2. Stop shrinking yourself just to make others feel more comfortable. To stop performing shallowness in a culture that rewards it. An invitation to stop apologizing for your depth. To stop shrinking to make others comfortable. To stop pretending that shallow is enough. Because the truth is, you are not broken. You never were. Your sensitivity is not a flaw. Your intensity is not a liability. Your depth is not something to hide. In fact, each one of those traits is a gift the world desperately needs, if it doesn't always recognize that need. You are not the problem. You are awake in a world that prefers sleep. You are conscious in a society that clings to numbness. Authentic in a culture built on masks and performance. Your sensitivity is not a weakness. It's your superpower. And your intensity, it's not too much. What's your drive? Your truth, your inner compass. It's the same intensity that gives you insight others may miss, empathy others may, fear and vision others have yet to see. The world needs what you have to offer, even if it doesn't always know how to receive it. The goal isn't to become smaller, quieter, more acceptable. It's to become stronger at being exactly who you are. It's not about forcing everyone to understand you. It's about learning to discern who can. It's about honoring your truth without hostility and knowing which spaces can hold it without breaking. The path forward isn't about becoming less of who you are. It's about becoming more skilled at being who you are. It's about identifying where your soul can breathe, recognizing when to walk away from environments that suppress your essence. It's about finding your tribe not because you need constant validation, but because resonance is healing. At the same time, it's about holding compassion for those who don't yet see what you see. It's about learning to love yourself so deeply that the world's rejection cannot touch your core. Because when your relationship with your own authenticity is strong, you can stand firm even when the winds of misunderstanding blow hard. You can be patient with others' unconsciousness because you no longer need their approval to feel grounded in your truth. It's about developing such a strong relationship with your own authenticity that you can afford to be patient with others' unconsciousness. It's about growing so rooted in your truth that storms no longer shake you, they reveal you. And though the road may be steep, the view it offers is unlike anything seen from the surface. The deep thinker's journey is not an easy one. It takes courage to walk a path where few go. It takes strength to question when others settle for easy answers. It takes resilience to keep your heart open in a world that often asks you to close it. But in return, you gain something priceless. The beauty of authentic connection, the satisfaction of living purposefully. Though scattered across the globe, there are others like you. Others who are also feeling deeply, questioning endlessly, seeking meaning in a world drenched in distraction. Some of them you will find. Others quietly, perhaps unexpectedly, will find you. Solitude and loneliness are frequently confused, but they are not the same. Loneliness is the ache of being disconnected from others, and emptiness echoing in the absence of shared experience. Solitude, by contrast, is the fullness of being truly connected to oneself. For the deep thinker, this distinction is not merely semantic, it is essential to their psychological and emotional survival. More often than not, the deep thinker finds themselves alone, not because they seek isolation, but because their presence unsettles the status quo. Their depth can be intimidating, their intensity confronting. Their questions pierce through comfortable illusions, and their authenticity can feel like too much for those not ready to face their own. As a result, they are sometimes excluded, misunderstood, or left lingering at the edges of social spaces. But within this solitude, sometimes chosen, often enforced, lies a hidden gift. Away from the pressure to perform, to conform, to shrink, or simplify themselves for social comfort, the deep thinker can finally breathe. They can stretch into their full emotional range. They can dive deeply into thoughts that are too complex to be squeezed into passing conversations. They can reconnect with the self that gets buried beneath the masks in solitude. There is room to process the constant emotional input from the outside world. Room to distinguish between what is truly theirs and what they've absorbed. From others, it is here, in the quiet, that they can hear the sound of their own soul again. It is where they remember who they are, beneath all the adaptations. The mystics of the Middle Ages understood this intimately. They wrote of the dark night of the soul, a time of spiritual desolation and perceived abandonment that ultimately brings the seeker closer to the divine. In much the same way, the deep thinker may experience solitude not as punishment, but as initiation, a stripping away of the superficial to reveal the sacred core. Yet, this alchemical transformation is not automatic. It requires intention, skill, courage. The deep thinker must learn how to transmute loneliness into solitude, isolation into insight, rejection into radical self-acceptance. This is not about closing the door on others forever. It's about opening the door inward, or in one's own depths. First, they must become good company to themselves, must learn to sit in silence, without fear, to explore their inner terrain not as a lonely exile, but as a wise traveler. In that stillness, they often find the very connection they longed for externally. This doesn't mean retreating from the world or abandoning human connection. It means forming such a solid and honest relationship with oneself that desperation is replaced with discernment. When you are no longer starving for acceptance, you gain the patience to wait for genuine understanding. The frequency of finding the question that haunts many deep thinkers is, where are my people? After years, sometimes decades of feeling like strangers in their own world, of walking among others while secretly carrying oceans of thought and emotion, they begin to ask this aching question in earnest. Is there anyone out there who thinks this deeply, feels this intensely, questions this constantly? Is it possible that others like them exist? The comforting truth is, yes, they do exist. The good news is that these people exist. They walk among us, quiet and observant, often hidden in plain sight. But the more sobering truth is that discovering them is not always easy. The challenging news is that finding them requires both patience and courage. It's not a matter of simply showing up somewhere. It's about showing up as oneself, fully, bravely, with discernment. Deep thinkers often find themselves drawn to particular kinds of environment spaces that invite contemplation and inspire meaning. They gravitate toward bookstores and libraries, where silence is honored and ideas are sacred. You'll find them lingering in art galleries and museums, absorbing the emotion behind brushstrokes and sculptures. They seek out cozy corners in coffee shops, where solitude and social possibility coexist. Their interests pull them toward philosophy and psychology, literature and poetry, anything that examines the human condition beyond surface level. They're attracted to spiritual practices and healing arts not as trends, but as doorways to deeper self-awareness. While others choose escapist sitcoms, they choose documentaries. While many chase entertainment, they seek meaning. They are not looking to be distracted, they are looking to understand. But even in these environments, deep thinkers often remain hidden. Over time, they've learned to suppress their intensity, to gently dial back their truth in order to avoid judgment or misunderstanding. They've developed social camouflage, testing the waters, measuring the emotional climate, waiting for signs of safety before revealing their inner world. Finding one another, therefore, requires more than shared interests. It calls for a kind of emotional sonar, a finely tuned ability to sense resonance beneath surface interaction. The signs are subtle, but recognizable. It's in the person who leans in when you speak, who asks meaningful follow-up questions that go beyond politeness. It's in the one who shows genuine curiosity about your inner landscape, who isn't satisfied with small talk or surface answers. It's the person who references books you've never heard of, books that open entirely new doorways in your mind. It's the one who observes what others overlook, who carries an invisible but unmistakable depth, a quiet gravity of awareness. When two deep thinkers cross paths and recognize one another, it often feels like coming home. There's a sense of relief, even wonder finally. Someone who speaks the same language. Someone who doesn't require things to be diluted, simplified, or disguised. Someone who doesn't flinch at complexity or emotion. These connections, while rare, are profoundly nourishing. They feed the soul in ways few other relationships can. But part of the deep thinker's growth lies in expanding their understanding of connection itself. Not every relationship must be soul-shaking or intellectually transcendent. Deep thinkers must also learn to appreciate different types of relationships. Some connections may be rooted in shared hobbies, others in practical support, others still in humor or gentle companionship. The key is not expecting every person to meet every emotional or intellectual need. Instead, the deep thinker must learn to cultivate a balanced ecosystem of relationships, each one offering a unique kind of nourishment. When woven together, these connections provide the richness, stimulation, and stability that their inner world requires. The revolutionary act of authenticity. In today's cultural world that profits from our fears, our insecurities, and our constant comparison, living authentically is not just a personal choice. It is a radical act. To show up as yourself, to refuse to conform to shallow expectations, to prioritize truth over performance, this is nothing short of rebellion. The deep thinker who refuses to dim their light, who insists on exploring discomfort, who values meaning over appearances, becomes a quiet but powerful threat to systems that depend on conformity and distraction. Consider this. How much of our economy thrives on making us feel like we're not enough? The beauty industry capitalizes on our supposed flaws. A self-help world often plays on our feelings of inadequacy. The entertainment industry feeds us constant noise, hoping we'll stay too distracted to notice our own dissatisfaction. The deep thinker disrupts this pattern simply by being awake. The deep thinker who has found peace with themselves, who values substance over style, who seeks meaning over entertainment, represents a challenge to these systems. Also questioning, also feeling, also seeking depth in a shallow world. So trust the pull of your authenticity. Let it be the signal that calls in those who resonate. Trust that even if your light feels unrecognized, it is shining, and those meant to see it will trust that your authenticity is a beacon that will attract those who can appreciate its light. The world may seem to prefer illusion, but deep down it's crying out for truth. It wraps itself in distraction, praises appearances, and celebrates performance, but beneath the noise and spectacle, it aches for something real. It may seem to reward performance, but secretly it's hungry for authenticity, a hunger that goes unspoken but is deeply felt. It pretends to be satisfied with the superficial, yet its soul quietly longs for the nourishment only depth can bring. It may seem to value surface, but its soul is starving for depth, and that's where you come in. You are not a disruption, you are a response. A necessary counterbalance to the empty glitter of the modern world. You are the answer to that hunger, not by becoming someone else, but by standing fully as who you are. You are the light in the darkness, the flicker of hope in an age of facades. You are the quiet courage in a room full of noise. You are the depth in the shallows, the anchor when everything feels adrift. You are the truth in the illusion. So don't turn yourself down to match the room. Don't shrink your brilliance so others feel less challenged. Don't dim your light to make others comfortable. Let it shine not arrogantly but honestly. Let it reveal what's real. Don't soften your words just to avoid discomfort. Don't silence your truth just because it might make someone uneasy. Your honesty is medicine. questions are necessary. Don't shrink your truth to fit their comfort zones. Don't apologize for being exactly who you are. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to help others remember. Remember what it means to feel, to question, to care, to search for meaning. The world needs your questions, your feelings, your depth, your truth. It needs your passion that refuses to be diluted, your clarity that cuts through illusion, your voice that speaks what many are afraid to name. It needs your refusal to accept easy answers, your insistence on meaning, your commitment to authenticity. It needs your tears and laughter, your silence and your fire. It needs the full, unapologetic, beautifully layered version of you, not the edited one. It needs your beautiful, complicated, intense, magnificent self. So stop holding back. Let the world meet you fully. Step into your skin without apology and live from that place of truth. Let people see who you really are, because that, more than anything, is what shifts the collective soul. So be yourself fully, completely, unapologetically. Even when the world stares in confusion. Even when it looks away. Even when it tries to box you in. You are not here to be easily understood. You are here to be deeply felt. The world may not always understand, but it will be forever changed by your presence. Even the silent ones will remember you. Even the quiet observers will feel it. And, in the end, that's all any of us can offer. To be who we are as deeply and authentically as possible. To live with open hearts, steady hands, and grounded souls, and to trust that being ourselves is not only enough, it's the very thing the world needs most. And trust that it's enough because it is. You are enough. You are more than enough. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not lost. You are light. You're exactly what the world needs, even if it doesn't always know it. Welcome to the tribe of the awake. Welcome to the community of the conscious. Welcome to the space where depth is not only accepted but celebrated. Welcome to the fellowship of the deep. You are home. Somewhere you left my heart turn into some you left my mind cold and blue. Love is fake, but none hurt like you. Rain on my soul, your shadow won't part. Rain on my soul, it drowns my heart. Tell me that you love one star. Fing wails like my tears in the dark. Steel drum sides where you left your mark. Chicago streets crown, my world fall apart. Too many loves but yours cut so deep. Too many loves, yet your ghost I keep. Soon now, your heart breaks.